Like every other Washington fan out there, I've dreamt of the day where Dan Snyder no longer owns the team. And it turns out, it might be sooner than we expected. Simply put, Dan Snyder isn't just in trouble with the NFL, but with the United States government. The Federal Trade Commission put together a 20-page letter that included allegations by Jason Friedman, the former vice president of sales and customer service, who spent 24 years with the organization. Friedman claims there were different sets of books to track financials, one which was used to underreport ticket revenue to the NFL. It is really, really hard to be forced to sell an NFL team. But I have to imagine that stealing from the NFL is probably one of the fastest ways to get there. The money made through the shady practices was allegedly called juice within the organization, and Washington had reported some money made incorrectly to concerts or college football games at FedEx Field in order to not be included in the NFL's revenue-sharing pool. One of the main examples used was executives processing $162,000 that was made during an actual NFL game that Washington was playing in at FedEx Field, and they instead reported that money to be made during a Navy-Notre Dame game. So that way, they didn't have to share the money with any other owners, it was just their money. Friedman also claimed that Washington would routinely withhold security deposits that should have been returned, would not refund requests over email, and never told leaseholders about a change no longer requiring security deposits for new club seat agreements. The document showed that Washington hadn't returned security deposits for over 2,000 accounts, totaling about $5 million. It reportedly happened over the course of several years and was done at the direction and the benefit of Dan Snyder. Executives would intentionally underreport ticket revenue in the electronic database that should have been shared with the NFL. How did all of this come up, though? Of course, the workplace investigation into the sexual harassment and abuse of employees. Friedman also detailed the toxic work environment, the lack of accountability, and the concerning business practices of Dan Snyder. So far, the organization has denied all the allegations, and the Oversight Committee hasn't verified any of the evidence. I think no matter how you want to twist this makes Dan Snyder look really bad, and it makes Washington overall as an organization look really bad. To put things kind of blatantly, Dan Snyder was stealing not just from the NFL, but also from fans. He was stealing from the NFL and owes money to other owners now in the NFL if all this ends up being true, because he withheld that money. They didn't get their extra share of money that they should have gotten for ticket sales that Washington had for their home games. Instead, Snyder found a shady way to make more money off of those. And so, yeah, he was blatantly stealing from the NFL, and I have to imagine that if you're going to get in trouble and have to sell a football team, it's probably going to be because you're directly stealing from the league. And that is essentially what he was doing. To make matters worse, he wasn't just stealing from a billion-dollar company. He was stealing from fans, taking security deposits, making sure not to actually give them back, and really just running a really, really shady business altogether. And I think there's just really no excuse for either one of these. And of course, we don't know if they are true or not. I think there's going to be an argument, and I think, Dan Snyder and Washington are likely going to come out against it. They've already said that, they haven't done any wrongdoings. And there is the argument, maybe Friedman is just a disgruntled employee. And I think that's probably what one of the arguments is going to be used as, but I don't necessarily think that's true, just in my opinion. And when you look further into it, this isn't an isolated incident. It's not like it's been one time that Washington's got in trouble. Every single time we turn around, there's something new going on in Washington. This is clearly a very, very toxic organization in every single way. Now you have the business practices that have their own issues with people at the top doing shady things with money, and you couple that in with all the other things that we've already heard about being toxic, the way the workplace is, we've talked about the sexual harassment type thing. It really just, Washington has been put in a bad light for such a long time, and for good reason, and it just continues to just dive deeper and deeper down into despair. Like Dan Snyder just can't seem to do anything right, and it's a clear issue. For the first time in my life, I think there's a realistic chance that Dan Snyder will be forced to sell the team. It's something that fans have always said they would love to happen. They don't want Dan Snyder anymore. They haven't liked him as an owner. It's been, over 20 years with really no success. But at the end of the day, the non-success doesn't matter. But once you start doing this shady stuff, you might actually have to sell the team. And I think if that happens, I think there's a handful of suitors that would be very interesting. Of course, Dan Snyder is a bad owner on his own, and maybe the guy that he ends up having to sell to ends up being a bad owner too. You just never know. I think one of the names that's going to be brought up a lot is probably Jeff Bezos. I think everybody knows that he wants to own an NFL team. A lot of Amazon headquarters are moving to Northern Virginia, pretty close to where the team kind of plays in Maryland. I think Ted Leonsis is another one that kind of makes sense. I don't know what his financials look like, but he already owns the Washington Mystics, Washington Wizards, and Washington Capitals. So we'll see what ends up happening there. But I know this is a far step behind, but you're also already looking at how Ted Lerner is also selling the Nationals, and it just seems like there's just going to be this huge shakeup with DC Sports in terms of ownership. I think really this is just another thing that's piling on top for Washington. Every time you turn around, there's something new going on with the Commanders, the football team, the Redskins, whatever you want to call them. It didn't matter what the name was. Every single time you turn around, they're involved, and more importantly, Dan Snyder is involved in some kind of new mess. And it's really why no one wants to go to Washington, because it's toxic, it's a disaster, and none of that is going to change until Dan Snyder sells the team.